The date is November 29th, 1995. I am interviewing Nancy, N-A-N-C-Y, Frank, F-R-A-N-K. My name is Ann Page. We are in North Miami Beach, Florida. Country is United States of America. We are speaking English. This is tape number 1. My name is Ann Page. I am interviewing Nancy Frank. The date is November 29th, 1995. We are in North Miami, Florida, in the United States of America, and we are speaking English. What is your name, please?
My name is Nancy Frank.
Could you spell it for me?
Nancyfrank.
And what was your name at birth?
Else Hausmann.
Could you spell that for me, please?
ELSEHAUSMANN.
Do you use any other names?
No.
How about what your grandchildren call you?
My grandchildren call me Oma.
How do you spell that?
O-M-A.
Okay. And what is your birth date, please?
My birthday is May 13, 1920.
And how old are you today?
I was just 75, May 13.
And what was the city and the country of your birth, please?
I was born in Fürth,
Do you want to spell it?
Bavaria,
Mhm.
in Germany.
Could you spell it for me, please?
F-U, with the umlaut, R-T-H.
Could you tell me about the city where you lived in Germany when you were a child first?
How was my life in Germany? It was beautiful. We had parks, we had rivers, we were swimming in the river, and we also had mountains, and we had a wonderful, beautiful country and city.
What was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Ida.
And what was her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Ida Franken.
Was she also from Fürth, Germany?
No, my mother was born in Bad Neustadt, which is near Kissingen, and it's a resort where they do baths.
Okay. And what was your father's name?
My father's name was Hermann Hausmann.
And was he from Fürth, Germany?
No, he was born in Nensenheim. It's a small village.
Do you know how your parents met?
Yes, they were introduced by a distant relative. They were introduced after my father came home from World War I. They all wanted to get married, and there was a shortage of women, and so they made the match.
And what brought them to Fürth, Germany?
Because my father started a small business, menswear business.
Well, could you tell me about your father in more detail, your memories that you have of him as a child?
Yes, he was wonderful. He was very protective of me. I was the only child. He would buy me had a fur coat made when I was a little girl. He would have the girl take me to the park, and then he would watch her, that nobody would take me away. He was like fanatic about taking care of me.
Was she like a governess?
She was, yes. She used to take care of me, yeah.
What else do you remember about your father?
Well, he always, was full of humor, had jokes, and he always told me to be honest, honesty, the best policy, and to be have a good character in life. He instilled in me these things.
Did he have hobbies?
Yes, he used to love German cars. He put me in the back seat, and he got me a little dog, and he would take me across the Alps, and then he would take me to school in this car, and he used to like to go bowling. He'd take me bowling.
What was your dog's name? Do you remember?
Tropf. He was a von Tropf.
And how about your mother? Could you tell us some memories you have about your mother?
My mother She was more strict. She was not so lenient, and she was very industrious, and she always wanted to save, and saved every penny. She would walk to get a bargain somewhere. And hard-working woman, very hard-working.
Do you remember your grandparents in Germany?
Yes.
What were their names?
There were, my grandfather was named Isidor Franken, and the grandmother was called Jede Franken, and they lived in Neustadt.
Did you see them very often?
Yes, every summer my parents would take me there, and I would stay there for several weeks with them.
And what do you remember about that period of your life?
I remember that my grandfather had a horse and a wagon, and he would take me with him to see other farmers, because he, besides having a shoe business, he would trade horses on the side.
And what do you remember about your grandmother from that period?
My grandmother, I remember, got sick, and she passed away from cancer.
And do you remember your other grandparents?
Yes, my grandmother lived right next door, and she would encourage me. She had a sewing machine, and she would let me use the little sewing machine, and I would make little dolls' clothes.
What was her name?
Her name was Babette Hausmann.
And did I ask you the name of your other grandparents? I don't think I did, but would you tell me?
The grandparents from whom?
The Frankel grandparents. Your mother's parents.
Well, that was Isidor.
Isidore, you did tell
Yeah.
me. Okay. I'm sorry if
Yeah.
I forgot that. Okay, so your grandmother lived right next door.
Yes.
And what was your house like?
Well, we were in an apartment, and I remember a real huge bathroom, and I had my own room, and it was facing the street. Most of the rooms were facing the street.
And was that close to your father's shop?
It was right across the street from his menswear business.
What was the name of his business?
It was called Hermann Hausmann Herrenkonfektion Geschäft.
Did your mother work with your father in the shop?
Yes, she was the driving force behind my father. She worked very hard. She was selling and taking care of customers. Kissinger the parents of Kissinger brought the boys in, and they bought their bar mitzvah suits from my parents' business.
And what was the street like that you lived on?
It was a narrow street, and it had a track where the Straßenbahn, the streetcar, used to go past regularly.
Did you have friends that lived in that neighborhood that were your age?
Yes, I had friends, German friends that, yes, I did.
And what did you do for recreation with your friends?
Well, we used to go skiing, and we used to go ice skating in the park and in a canal, which would freeze over in the winter, and for miles you'd go ice skating. And we go to the movies. Yes.
Now, at that time, were you members of a synagogue?
Yes, we belonged to the synagogue.
In that city of Fürth?
In Fürth, yeah.
Do you remember the name of the synagogue?
Yes, it was the Hauptsynagoge. Yeah.
And do you remember the name of the rabbi?
I don't remember the name of the rabbi.
That's okay. So did you observe the holy days? And
yes, we walked to shul on the holidays. I was singing in the choir, and we had an organ. It was a conservative synagogue, and I learned Hebrew. I was able to read the prayers and translate most of them.
And how about at home? Did you keep kosher? Or?
No, we didn't keep kosher.
That's okay. Now, did you go to a public school at that time, or
Yes.
what was your school environment like?
Went to elementary school and then to middle school, and then finally the girls' lyceum, which is equivalent to high school.
Mm-hmm.
And the father of Kissinger was the mathematics teacher for my class.
Mm-hmm. Did you experience any anti-Semitism growing up in that town?
Yes, and when we went to the synagogue, we were carrying our books, and on the street, the kids and other people would rip our books away, and they would call us names, and they would really taunt us and follow us, and made it difficult.
Did your parents instruct you about why this happened or how to react?
Well, we had to listen in school to Hitler speeches, and in 1933, when I was 13 years old, when Hitler came into power, overnight, everybody was in uniform, in the brown shirts.
And that happened overnight. Were you aware that this was about to happen?
Not really. We didn't know that everybody was going to be like in uniform and so organized.
Mm-hmm.
And
did they make you go to a different school after that happened?
Yes, we were ordered to leave the school, and we all had to go to a Jewish school.
Do you remember the name of that school?
I forgot the name.
Mm-hmm. What was that experience like for you?
It was very traumatic because the people, the kids and the friends, we just could not associate with them at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it was scary. It was like very, very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would have, in front of the house, we would have this marching. The troops were marching by every morning, and they were singing Nazi songs.
And you could observe this because you said your windows face the street.
Yes, saw them walking, marching, and singing songs about how they were going to kill the Jews and how good it felt when the Jewish blood would run from their knives. And
how did you feel about that?
very frightened, very scared.
Mm-hmm. Did you witness any acts of violence
Yes.
against the Jewish people in
Yes.
that town? Could you tell
Yes,
me about
yes.
it?
Well, actually, this happened in front of the house where the troops, the SR, they call them Sturmabteilung, SR,
Mm-hmm.
and they would form the circle, and they had a man, a communist evidently, and they beat him to death. They used the clubs, and they just beat him till he was finished.
And this happened outside your window?
I was watching from my window.
Mm-hmm.
And then another time, my mother sent me to the fruit store a few doors away, and also one man made a remark about the government, and the owner of the fruit store, this was a Jewish man that made the remark, and he picked up a marble board and he hit him and killed him right then and there.
In front of you?
In front of me.
How old were you at that time?
I was probably around 14.
So you went home. Did you tell your parents what you had witnessed?
Yes, yes.
And what did your parents tell you?
They couldn't say anything. Everybody was afraid, so after that nobody ever said anything.
Mm-hmm. How about your clothes? Were you forced to wear something that would identify you as a Jewish person?
No, but they made searches in the houses. They would come because the law was that on Sunday you could only cook in one pot. The meal would have to be an Eintopfgericht. And they would periodically check on people. They would just come to your door, you have to let them in, and they would check what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you didn't follow those rules, they could just arrest you.
Did your father experience any acts of anti-Semitism in his business?
Yes, they came, and they, at one point, his best friend who owned a shoe store, Gentile, a very loyal friend, warned him to leave town that particular day because they were arresting a lot of people. And also They broke the windows in the store, my father's store, and they posted a SR person, and they put the signs as a Jewish store.
Was he able to conduct his business after that happened?
Well, he did, but they were looking to leave Germany, and we were trying to get my uncle to send the affidavit because he'd been in the United States, and he's a citizen.
Could you try to think back and tell me if there were any more important acts of anti-Semitism that you may have witnessed, or anything important, and perhaps any important Jewish leaders that you saw?
Well, we were rounded up, and we had to watch the synagogue burning. We had to do that. And the whole thing was a nightmare. It was so scary, and everybody was very nervous, and I really was desperate to leave, but my mother was against. She couldn't get herself to leave everything behind. She figured my father was in World War I. He was a soldier for 4 years in the front lines, fighting for the so-called fatherland. He lost his brother in the war, and my mother just never believed that this would continue. She thought that he was safe. He would be safe because he was a loyal German.
Did you happen to, while you were in Germany at that time, see any famous people?
Yes, I saw Hitler in the car, in an open car. He was standing, and he had his hand outstretched, and was just driving through the town because they were having the Nuremberg Party Congress Day, which was a big affair, and millions seemed to come from everywhere for that, in a stadium in Nuremberg.
What were you feeling at that moment when you saw him in that car? How did you feel?
I just felt that this would be the real thing, that they were really out to destroy everybody. I had that feeling, because they were so organized and so hateful. Even people that you thought were friends, they turned on you, and you had to be afraid of everything you said and did.
So you actually had some friends that you grew up with that turned against you?
Yes, and some that had to stay away because they were warned, because they all had to join the Nazi party, and that was it.
Did you have any friends who were not Jewish who tried to remain loyal to you?
Yes, I did. I did.
Do you want to say who it was?
Well, yes. One friend, she later on, my father sponsored her to come to the United States. He sent her the affidavit, and she came to the United States, and she was very grateful, but she didn't stay too long because she went back and she ended up marrying an Englishman.
What was her name?
Ulla. Her name was Ulla.
Okay, so thinking back now, is there anything else that was important? You said that when you went to Jewish school, they made you listen to the speeches of Hitler.
Yes.
Over the intercom. What information did you get from those speeches about what was happening?
Well, what was happening was that Germany was going to conquer the world. They were uniting, that the Jews were the enemies, and that everybody, it was going to be a Aryan, pure Aryan country. And the blacks and the Jews were going to be put against the wall and shot.
He said that in his speeches?
Yes.
And they played this over the intercom?
Yes, yes.
So you were very frightened?
Oh, yes.
So at this time your parents were trying to make plans
Yes.
for you to leave the country of Germany?
Yes. My uncle, by that time, sent the affidavit, and my father took me to Stuttgart, to the American consulate, and got the papers. And then I left a few months before my parents did.
What was the uncle's name who was able to help you get the affidavit?
It was my mother's brother. His name was Joseph Franken.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent affidavits for the family.
Mm-hmm. What do you remember about the last day you were in Germany?
I remember my mother took me to the train station, and she took the trip with me to Bremerhaven. That's where the ship was leaving from. And my father couldn't go. He was too soft-hearted. He could not see me leave, so she took me. And when I finally said goodbye to her, I had so many mixed emotions. I didn't know whether I would ever see anybody again.
So you thought that you might not see your parents again?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
how old were you?
I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
And on the ship, we were warned about people that were spying, and I was afraid of talking to people and people listening to conversations. And I remember being very seasick, and it's a horrible trip.
Do you remember the name of that ship?
Yes, it was the SS Washington.
Mm-hmm. And how long did it take you to come from Germany to the United States on that ship?
I think it took 8 days.
Mm-hmm. And where did it land when it arrived in the United States?
It landed in New York.
Mm-hmm. And was your uncle there to greet you?
Yes, my uncle picked me up, yes.
Mm-hmm. And then what happened when you arrived in the United States?
Well, I stayed with a family. I just had a little room, and they sent me to beauty school to take up beauty culture, which I had in Germany gone for several months in a beauty shop as an apprentice.
Mm-hmm. And at that time, did you know any German people in the United States other than your uncle?
Yes, I had some second cousins. They were living nearby, and they had this huge apartment. They rented out all kinds of rooms to refugees.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go over there and spend time because I was very lonesome. I didn't know anybody.
Did you experience any anti-Semitism here in the United States?
Not right away, not really, no.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't speak English well,
Mm-hmm.
and I had, problem with going to a store and the money, trying to, get the right change, and people took advantage and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a traumatic experience when the police came one day to your door?
Yes, the people I was staying with, they had refugees come for dinner because the landlady cooked every night. And one day the police came and they wanted to know if I could identify a certain young man that had been coming there. And I said yes, and they took me to the morgue, and I identified him. He had jumped off a hotel building.
Do you know what his name was?
No.
Do you know why he did that?
Yes, he was afraid that his family wouldn't get out, and he was so depressed. So he did that.
How did this influence your life at that point?
At that point, I wrote my parents, and I wrote strong letters, and I even wrote under the post stamp that they must get out, because if they don't get out, the letters would stop, and there'd be no more letters from me. I would just not be around anymore. So when my father heard that, he figured out that I was very depressed, and he made every effort to talk my mother into using the affidavit and leave.
So you actually wrote this message underneath the postage stamp, and they removed the postage stamp to receive the message?
Yes, we had made that up before.
You decided that together before you left Germany?
Yes, And they did give me some they sent me several items. I was taking a few bracelets, gold bracelets, and that they bought, so I would have some money that I could sell in the United States and have some cash.
Mm-hmm.
And you were allowed to take, I think, a camera or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, your parents made the decision that they should join you in the United States.
Yes.
And they had affidavits
Yes.
to come because your uncle helped to sponsor them.
Yes.
So how soon after your arrival in the United States were your parents able to join you?
About 6 months. And my father was so grateful that when he became a citizen and he had a job, he sponsored other people to come.
Mm-hmm.
He saved people.
Mm-hmm. Who, in addition to your childhood friend, do you remember that your father sponsored to come to the United States?
My first cousin, Werner Newman, he had gone to Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And a family took him in, and he sent him the affidavit.
Mm-hmm. Did you know of any family members that were left behind in Germany that were not able to get out, that perhaps went to concentration camps?
Yes, my first cousin, Liesl Hertz, her father had committed suicide by gassing himself one Sunday afternoon, and my aunt, the mother, she remarried the man who was in the business. He was the business manager, Gentile. She married him, and from what I understand later on, he got my cousin pregnant, and she was taken to a concentration camp, and she died of hunger, according to the Red Cross.
Nancy, Frank, this is the beginning of tape 2. Okay, did your grandmother remain in Germany when your parents came over?
Yes, my grandmother stayed behind. She was too old, and she just didn't want to leave. She was in her 80s and decided not to go.
What happened to her, do you know?
My grandmother just passed away
Mm-hmm.
soon after, normally.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and were there any other family members, extended family members?
Yes, my father's sister, she was married to the manager of her store and the mother of the cousin that went to camp. She died in a hospital, and they said it was an embolism, but it was very questionable because she was healthy and she was not sick or anything. It just was very questionable.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, were you working when your parents came to the United States?
Yes, I was going to beauty school, Wilfred Academy, and it's still in business. And the school was right next to the famous theater where Frank Sinatra used to appear on Broadway. And when he was appearing, we played hooky and saw Frank Sinatra. It was in the beginning of his career, and it was very exciting.
Mm-hmm. And after you finished beauty school, were you employed?
Well, during the time I went to beauty school, on Saturdays and Sundays, they took us by bus to orphanages in New Jersey, and we learned how to cut hair on these children in orphanages, give the boys haircuts, and that's how we practiced.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a job, a weekend job also. During the time I was learning the business, I was sent to different places in the city and on the subway trains, and it was very, very hard because it was very hot. Wasn't used to the climate, and sometimes I would pass out on a train because it was so hot and not being used to the climate.
Were you now living with your parents?
Yes, I moved in with my parents, and they had an apartment, and my mother would also, at that time, cook and rent out rooms. And my mother, who never cooked a day in her life, she took up cooking from a cookbook. She had to do it. She didn't care for it, but then my father brought home, he had a job doing piecework, and he was supervisor. He brought piecework home, and we all did like piecework to make money.
Mm-hmm. Would you go on and tell us about your life from that point on? What happened?
Yes, in the summertime, my uncle would, the one that sent us the affidavit, he would send my mother's father, my grandfather, up to the Catskills for the summer. He put him in a small hotel. I was opposite the Concord Hotel, and we go up and visit him, and at night go across to the Concord Hotel and participate in games that played in the social hall. And that's where the social director turned out that I ended up getting married to him. He was an American. I wanted to marry an American. I was so, I don't know, I just felt being in America, I didn't want another refugee. I wanted a new life with an American.
What was his name?
His name was Ben Tolber.
Mm-hmm. Did you have children with him?
Yes, we had 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
He went overseas right after we got married in an army camp, Camp Robinson, and that was in Arkansas. And he was shipped overseas, and when he came back, we found an apartment, and I had 3 children.
What are their names?
The oldest one is Stephen Gary Tolber. My daughter is Vicki Lynn, and my last son is Reed Stewart Tolber.
Mm-hmm. And what happened after you had your 3 children? And did you still live in that area?
Yes, we stayed there for quite a while, and then ended up, we went to California.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really beautiful in California, and liked the beaches, and had a very good life there, but I still worked.
Mm-hmm. As a beautician?
No, I worked as direct sales.
Mm-hmm.
I went door to door selling music lessons, Chinaware, on $1 a week, $1 down, $1 a week plan.
Amazing.
Those days you could knock on doors,
Mm-hmm.
and people would invite you in.
Then what happened?
What happened? We moved to Atlanta, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really very nice in Georgia. Joined the synagogue, was very active. I was the social secretary in the synagogue, and then organized every Sunday adult education. I got wonderful speakers, mayors, and different very educational subjects. And that went on for a while.
And then?
In Atlanta. Oh, then I got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
A marriage failed.
Mm-hmm.
And I met my second husband.
What was his name?
His name was Freddie Frank,
Mm-hmm.
and he was in the record business. He was
Mm-hmm.
with Epic Records. He was a record promoter, and had a very exciting life. He met some top recording stars,
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Vinton, George Maharis, Caddy Lester. We all entertained them at my house.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved to Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and had a nice house right near where I live at this moment. And my second husband was transferred back to New York, and I just didn't feel I wanted to live in New York, and we split up too.
Then what happened?
After that, I was going out, and I was doing sales, and I was doing flea market sales, and I met at a dance, I met my third husband.
What was his name?
His name was Sheldon Frank.
Mm-hmm.
He used to call me Nancy Frank because I had married now the second Frank. And it was a short marriage, and he died of a heart attack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm single.
You're single now? And do you have grandchildren?
I have I have 6 grandchildren.
What are their names?
I have Rachel, Noel, she's 19. Then I have Justin Richardson, my daughter's 3. He's the oldest, and then the second one is Jessica Nicole, and then there's Jake Michael, who is 6. And then my youngest son, Reed, he just had a set of twins, and they're 8.5 months old.
And what are the twins' names?
Harris, Benjamin, and Grant Stewart.
Could you encapsulate for us about your health? What happened? You had something very particular happen to you because of your health. I'd like to know that story.
What happened was I had a heart problem where my heart wasn't beating well. And they tried all kinds of medication on me and decided finally that I needed a pacemaker. I had the pacemaker for 18 years. I had 8 different operations on the pacemaker. Every one of them would fail. My body would reject it. The wires broke. And 4 years ago, I took my son to Israel, my son Reed. He and I and his best friend Larry and his father went to Israel, and we spent 3 weeks in Israel. And at one point, we went to the Wailing Wall, and everybody was putting messages in the wall. And I put the message in that I wish my son would get married, the last one to be married. He would find peace and happiness with a woman. And then the second wish was for myself about the pacemaker. And things happened after that. My son got married, and 2 years ago, almost 18 years after the pacemaker was put in, they had checked me on a telephone, and they said, you must see the doctor immediately. Your pacemaker isn't charging. When I went to see the doctor, he said, took all kinds of tests. He says, you don't need it anymore. He said, it's a miracle that you don't need it anymore, because once you have a failing sinus node, it's forever. He said, it's like a miracle what happened to you. And I do believe this is what happened.
What is the message that you would like to tell future generations about the Holocaust in your experience?
The message is, even if terrible things happen, don't have hate in your heart. You have to learn to forgive. Your friends, if somebody does something bad, it's forgivable. You must get over it and go on with it. Don't hold bad feelings so you never be happy yourself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Who is this, please?
This is my mother's grandfather, my great-grandfather. And this was taken in 1916 when he was 90 years old.
And what was his name?
His name was Hirsch Franken. Hirsch.
Who is this, please?
This was my mother's grandmother. The picture was taken in Bad Neustadt, Germany, and her name was Teresa Franken.
Who are these people, please?
Those are my grandparents, my mother's mother and father, and the picture was taken in Germany, approximately 1918 in Neustadt an der Saale.
Who are these people?
Those are my two uncles, brothers of my mother. The one on the left is Joseph Franken, and the other one is Hugo Franken. The picture was taken around 1919, just before they immigrated to the United States.
Okay. Who are these people?
Those are my grandparents on my father's side. The man on the left is Samuel Hausmann and his wife, Babette Hausmann. The picture was taken before World War II. In the 50s.
Who are these people, please?
Those are my parents. The picture was taken, my father's name is Hermann Hausmann, my mother's name Ida Hausmann. It was taken up in Fleischmann's at a hotel, the Meinstein Lodge, which my girlfriend that I went to school with owned.
Who is this?
This is a picture of myself, 18 months old, 1921 in Germany.
Who is this, please?
This is my first cousin, was my close friend, and she perished in the camp.
And what was her name?
Her name was Liesl Hetz.
And where was this taken?
This was taken in Tyrol with a little uniform.
Who are these people?
Those are my three beautiful children. Starting on the left, my son Reed, the lawyer. In the middle is my daughter Vicky. She's a nurse. And on the right is my oldest son Stephen, who is a doctor, a allergist. Wonderful children.
Who are these people?
Those are all the people that came to my 75th birthday party, my whole family. And the fellow on the left is my companion and best friend, Saul Silverstein.
Who are these people, please?
Those people on the picture are my 6 wonderful, wonderful grandchildren, starting with Jessica Richardson,
On the left?
on the left, Rachel Tolber, the twins, one on the left, Grant Stewart and Harris Benjamin. Then is Justin Edward and Jake Michael Richardson.